3 years ago, on July 21st, 2021, I made one of the biggest and most important financial decisions of my entire life. On that day, I joined a growing subset of Americans, which includes Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and many of our country's richest people, who are all getting wealthier faster than ever before by taking advantage of what is quickly becoming America's new money. To illustrate the power and potential of this new kind of money, get this. I am now making so much money that I agreed to cut my salary, which was formerly $500,000 a year, to only a token amount of just $1. Why on earth did I give up my salary after spending 30 years diligently earning higher pay year after year? Well, there are two reasons. First, because I'm not greedy and I simply don't need the money. But more importantly for you, because I wanted to prove a point. I have found a much better way to save and to get paid. For example, I recently pocketed more than $9 million in one day, and I'm set to receive another huge payment, more than $500,000 in the coming weeks. In total, I'm scheduled to receive millions more in 2024 and every year after too. That's without selling or trading anything, all because of the move I made a few years ago. Of course, I'm not the only one cashing in, far from it. A group of about 60 folks made news recently by collectively pocketing around $500,000 in 2 years with this new form of money. No stocks, no bonds, no gold, and no crypto involved. And a group of factory workers in California also made national headlines recently by reportedly becoming millionaires, thanks to America's new money, without buying stocks or any other investment. I've put together this presentation to show you what all of these folks and many of my employees and I are doing, why we're doing it, and to encourage you to join this group of Americans who are growing wealthier by the day, while so many in our country fall further and further behind. My name, by the way, is Porter Stansberry. You might have heard of me because of my outspoken views on structural racism. I'm against it. And the ways I believe DEI and ESG have harmed our markets and our country. I'm probably the least woke financial writer in all of America. And being outspoken on these issues has caused me a lot of problems. I've been canceled for years. Many of Wall Street's biggest banks still refuse to do business with me. And that's perfectly fine because I don't need them. And as I can show you, neither do you. Now, whether you share my libertarian views or not, I bet that in most ways we probably have a lot in common. I'm married. I have 3 children. I live on a beautiful farm. And I believe very strongly in the country that I grew up in. I believe in our institutions. I believe in American exceptionalism. I believe Americans are uniquely honest and open people, and that our country is destined for far greater things. But in a lot of ways, I'm probably also not like you. I'm the founder, chairman, and CEO of a large public company, which I started from my kitchen table in 1999 with a $36,000 investment and a borrowed laptop computer. Today, that business is called MarketWise, and it's one of the largest businesses of its kind in the world, worth nearly $1 billion. Over the last 30 years, I've ascended into a position of wealth I could have never imagined growing up. I was a middle-class public school kid from Central Florida. Along the way, I've met and done business with some of the world's most powerful and successful individuals, like former Congressman Ron Paul. I hired him to work with me for several years, and oil billionaire T. Boone Pickens. We argued for years about peak oil, which I debunked, and he, unfortunately, believed in. But after Boone changed his mind, we became great friends, and he graciously hosted me at his legendary 68,000-acre private hunting ranch in Roberts County, Texas. I wish you could have seen this place. After his death, that ranch was sold in pieces for more than $150 million. It was really an incredible place. He had 5 different mansions on the ranch. Why? Because he had to build a new one every time he got married again. He also had his own airport for his Gulfstream jet and his Bell helicopter. Boone was a once-in-a-lifetime friend. I've also spent a considerable amount of time with Shark Tank millionaire Kevin O'Leary, who has visited my office. and PGA golf pros like Kevin Kisner, whom I've sponsored for years and entertain at my farm when the PGA Tour is in town. Plus, I've met dozens of other American legends like Glenn Beck, Jim Rogers, and Steve Forbes. Having met all of these people over the past 25 years, I can tell you something that will, if you take it seriously and follow a few simple steps, completely change your life. You see, these people don't use money the way that you do, and they definitely do not save money the way that you do. They don't even use the same kind of money you do. What you'll find in this presentation will surprise you, and actually it may infuriate you too. But either way, it's important you know I'm telling the whole truth, because I am the CEO of a NASDAQ-listed company. All the details of my personal financial transactions described here are already available in the public domain. In fact, the details and disclosures link at the bottom of this page will take you to the source pages of all the facts I present. It's also important for you to know I didn't produce this presentation to tell you about me or my success. I put it together to impress upon you how it's possible for you to protect yourself and potentially grow your wealth in a dramatic way if you're willing to learn about America's new currency, which is changing people's lives every day. Most people simply don't realize there is an enormous change underway in America. Most people have no idea what's going on or, of course, what it means. In short, our government, the Federal Reserve, the U.S. Department of the Treasury, and the executive branch have destroyed the value of our traditional money, the U.S. dollar. The collapse of the dollar accelerated recently because of the trillions of free money that were handed out during the COVID crisis. That's when the collapse in the dollar, which is mislabeled inflation by the press, accelerated so much that many Americans finally took notice. But what most people don't fully understand is that it wasn't only COVID that caused this collapse of our currency. The constant devaluation of our money is the stated purpose of the Federal Reserve. What they don't tell you, of course, is that this policy is a way of ensuring endless profits for our banks and endless spending for Congress. It's a form of taxation that nobody voted for and that our politicians, investment bankers, and the ruling class hope that you never understand. To protect themselves from this ongoing assault on private property, many Americans have turned to an entirely different kind of money and transactions that have become seamless and easy thanks to a handful of recent technological innovations. Like I said, there is now a new form of money in America, and it's making some people wildly rich. It's not gold, it's not Bitcoin. Instead, it's a much better, more powerful, and much more lucrative version of the dollars we've all used for years. Yes, you'll still need ordinary US dollars to pay your bills and make certain purchases. That's not going away anytime soon. But today, it's easy, more easy than ever before, to swap your old money into the new money with just a few clicks of your mouse. And as you'll see, you can take advantage of this new form of money both inside our current system and the stock market, and also outside the current financial system as well. I'm going to show you how to do both, because I believe after you see how much wealthier this new form of money could make you in the years to come, you'll never want to hold ordinary US dollars ever again. Because every day, thousands of Americans are using our new money to ascend into an entire new level of wealth, something even beyond what millionaires could afford a decade ago. And instead of plateauing, this class, which is operating with this new form of money, just continues to get wealthier and wealthier and wealthier. This is turning millionaires into billionaires. I know, because I'm one of them. And on it goes, for those who understand what's really happening. But what about everybody else? Well, that's why I created this presentation. This secret has changed my life twice, and I want to make sure you are on the right side of this equation going forward, because the gap between the very rich and everyone else is going to accelerate in a way that we have never ever seen before. And the truth is, I didn't discover this secret all on my own. I've been working closely with a former hedge fund manager for many years. He's an expert on the best ways to use America's new money. I convinced him to share all the details with you here today, and you're going to meet him in just a minute. But for now, I'd like you to keep in mind that this information is critical for America as we've known it to survive. The more folks that are on the right side of this trend, the better it will be for all of us. The sad truth is that the only way to fight back against what our government is doing to our money is to simply and legally take matters into your own hands. It's not hard, but no one is going to do it for you. Yes, you're going to need a little help, but I'll explain it all here. And it's critical that you take these steps now, because while some people are getting richer and richer and richer, there's a downside too. More specifically, because of the ongoing collapse of our old money, there's an enormous bifurcation forming in our society. And yes, there's always been a wealth gap in America, but now it's accelerating like never before in our history, and no one in either political party or in the mainstream press is going to tell you the truth about why. It's not because of greedy corporations. It's not because we offshored manufacturing or because the minimum wage needs to be higher or because we need more unions. The accelerating wealth gap is 100% caused by the government's ongoing destruction of our money. I'll show you the proof of that in just a second. For those of you who don't understand what's going on, for those of you who are stuck with the old US dollars that continue to collapse, well, everything just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. This chart tells the story in a horrifying way. This chart shows how, despite the fact that the U.S. minimum wage has increased by more than 100% in many places in recent years, minimum wage earners just keep getting poorer and poorer when adjusted for the real cost of living. Meanwhile, the value of America's new money continues to soar. Look at this incredible chart of our old money versus the new. Now, this obviously has huge repercussions for our country. The collapse in value of our traditional dollars is the number one reason why more and more regular folks in our country are falling behind economically and simply giving up. These people, many of whom are smart and hardworking, simply don't understand what's happening or what they can do about it. No one teaches this stuff in school, after all. All most folks know is that even though they work harder and longer every year, they end up with less and less to show for it, while also piling on more and more debt. The significance of the collapse of our money cannot be overstated. This is why credit card debt is now at an all-time high. This is why houses are now more unaffordable than they have ever been, ever before in U.S. history. It's why the number of young adults living with their parents just hit an 80-year high. It's also why 60% of parents still have to help their adult children financially, according to the latest study that was out earlier this year. Sadly, and this is a huge problem, it's also why so many young men are turning to gambling and why so many young women are tragically turning to pornography to supplement their incomes. It's why today only 36% of Americans say the American dream, that if you work hard, save your money, you'll get ahead, still holds true. This percentage has been cut in half since 2012. Millions and millions of Americans are desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. If you're a student of economic history, this should come as no surprise. When Germany and Austria destroyed their currencies in the 1920s, criminal convictions soared 200% nationwide in Germany, and the number of people arrested for illegal gambling skyrocketed 500%. Of course, that was before they had gambling apps. In Vienna, the number of women arrested for illegal prostitution jumped nearly 40%. As Massachusetts Institute of Technology historian Bern Wedig concludes, the ever faster swelling stream of money betrayed long-held persuasions, swept away economic livelihoods, and destroyed the trust and confidence of an entire generation. And while most Americans are completely clueless about why our society is coming apart at the seams, I know exactly why it's all happening, and I know exactly what you should do about it. Remember, it starts with your money, especially the money you are saving and planning to use in retirement. It all starts with who controls, regulates, and distributes this money. Let me show you what I mean. Ever since the invention of money some 3,000 years ago, money has been created and regulated by various factions, including the government, the church, other religious orders, merchant leagues, craftsmen's guilds, banking families, private industrialists, national banks, currency traders, and most recently, computer programmers with cryptocurrencies. These various groups have used everything from gold, silver, shells, coins, bills, notes, and checks to bonds, bank accounts, and ledgers in a computer system. As monetary historian Jack Weatherford says, people have fought over control of money because it not only provides wealth and luxury, but also power and influence. And when you study economic history, you discover, as Weatherford points out, quote, money is never a quiet, passive tool, and it never stays in the same place or in the same hands for very long. When one powerful group rigs the system in their favor, new, alternative forms of money emerge. And that's exactly what happened when Bitcoin was introduced in 2008 in the middle of the great financial crisis. And it's what's happening right now on an even bigger scale. Today, we are at the start of an enormous monetary shift. People like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Tim Cook of Apple, and many of my employees and me, we are all transitioning away from traditional US dollars to what is essentially a new and better form of money, which can make you a lot wealthier in the years to come. The truth is, I believe learning how to take advantage of this secret is the only way to generate serious wealth in America today. You must learn how big institutions, central banks, and powerful personalities are trying to control the production and distribution of our money, and how the very definition of money is changing. To understand how and why America's new money is soaring in popularity, and why it's causing such a dramatic bifurcation between the haves and the have-nots in our society, we must step back to look at a few critical facts and figures that show how we got here. Let's start back in 2008. Under President Obama's leadership, the Federal Reserve took interest rates to zero for the first time ever to rescue the economy from the effects of the global financial crisis. Then, because suppressing interest rates didn't immediately cause massive inflation, the Fed decided to keep interest rates low and print money on top of that, about $5 trillion of new money, which they called quantitative easing. At the same time, U.S. government officials saw what was happening in Japan, where by 2013, government debt grew to be twice the size of the entire country's economy. People thought that would be the end of Japan, but the country didn't collapse, it just stagnated. So U.S. officials ignored hundreds of years of economic history and concluded that artificially suppressing interest rates didn't matter, and that printing trillions of dollars wouldn't matter either. They also argued that accumulating enormous amounts of debts wouldn't have negative consequences. But mark my words, these moves will go down as the worst monetary decisions in U.S. history. These steps absolutely destroyed the value of our money. And then came COVID. And that's when President Biden and the Fed went completely off the rails. All in money spent for the COVID crisis, $13 trillion. That was $5.2 trillion for COVID, plus $4.5 trillion for quantitative easing, plus $3 trillion to prevent inflation, all borrowed or created out of thin air. Keep in mind, that's more than the U.S. spent in our 13 most expensive wars combined. Now listen, I know you've heard all of these numbers before, and we've all grown simply numb to what these numbers means. I mean, who even knows what $1 trillion is? It's such a huge number, it's impossible to even imagine. So forget about the numbers. The critical point you need to understand is that the people who control, regulate, and distribute our money have simply destroyed it. The US dollar's purchasing power, that is what it will buy you, is going to zero. And there's no going back. Everything that's important in our lives, food, shelter, transportation, healthcare, education, insurance. Have you seen your insurance bill lately? All of that stuff is vastly more expensive. And from here, those prices are going to go much, much higher. Bloomberg did an independent study recently and concluded that overall, prices have soared about as much from early 2020 to today as they did in the previous 10 years. So if you're wondering why people are so angry, if you're wondering why millions of Americans seem to be falling behind, and if you're wondering why there is so much crime all of a sudden, just look at the facts. Insurance costs have shot up 33%. Do you know it's not uncommon anymore for a young male to have to pay $7,000 a year for car insurance, even with a clean driving record? This is why more than 26% of Florida drivers don't even bother getting car insurance anymore. Electricity prices have skyrocketed across the nation, and in several states are up more than 40%. Used car prices have jumped 35%. At the same time, houses are now less affordable than at any time ever before in American history. Auto loan rates have soared. Borrowing with a credit card has never been this expensive before. A restaurant trade publication says the price of a cheeseburger, just a cheeseburger, at a restaurant has increased 63% in the past 4 years. And if you're still not convinced that millions of Americans are falling behind, please consider two simple stats. Fact number one, credit card balances are now $154 billion higher than they were only 1 year ago. This is the largest annual increase ever to credit card debt since the New York Fed began tracking the figures. And fact number two, this past year marked the first time in American history that our government spent more than $1 trillion on what? On debt. This is the first time they ever spent more than $1 trillion just to pay the interest on our debt. Mark my words, the US dollar has started a massive collapse that will last for years. How far will the dollar drop from here? I predict a fall of 40 to 50% or more from today's levels. You can see how past moves down have typically lasted for at least 7+ years, and the dollar has fallen in each of these declines by about 40%. You can also see how each time the dollar falls, it hits a new lower low. I expect we will eventually see the lowest price for the US dollar in a century. What has happened to our money is fundamentally terrible for our society. Working folks and retirees can no longer depend on the wages of regular income for their safety and for the well-being of their families. And the worst part about the destruction of our money isn't the things that the economists will tell you about. It's not the higher interest rates. It's not soaring debts. It's not record bankruptcies. It's not the ongoing inflation. The worst part about a collapse of the currency is what it does to societies. As money falls apart, it becomes harder and harder and then impossible for people to cooperate and to trust one another. You see, as the currency is destroyed, so is the social fabric of our country. This is why today, only 36% of Americans still believe in the American dream. Isn't that a shame? Like I said, that figure has been cut in half just in about the last 10 years. The sad thing is, there is very little or nothing that you or I can do about this disaster, except we can spread the word and we can help as many people as possible position themselves in the most favorable way. As I said, while so many are suffering, there is a subset of Americans who have figured out how the game has been rigged. And I admit, I'm one of them. We continue to grow richer and richer almost every day. But I also want you to know, I actually just got rid of my salary because I don't need it. I'm the chairman, the CEO, and the founder of a company, and I started it 25 years ago. So you'd think I would keep getting a salary, but I turned it down because I don't need it. You see, as I explained, I found a better form of currency, and it's exactly what I want to show you too. I want you to have the same advantage that I do. What I want you to realize is that you actually do have a choice in all of this. This alternative form of money and savings is totally legal, and it is available to everyone. But very few Americans have any real working knowledge of how to implement this strategy or to even know that it exists. But don't worry, I'm going to explain everything you need to know about America's new money right now. Like I said, you'll still need regular old dollars to pay your bills, but don't fall for the trap that you need to rely on regular old US dollars for your savings and your retirement. Those old dollars become worth less and less every passing day. They're no good for saving. The good news is, though, there's a real, completely legal, and much better alternative. People like Bezos, Musk, Cook, the richest people in America, we've all figured out this secret, and I'm going to show you how it works and how to capitalize on it beginning today. Here are the specifics. Remember that money is never quiet. It's always shifting, and the biggest shift in 100 years is now underway. Although this move has been a long time coming, this big change actually started way back in the early 1970s. Because as far as the US dollar goes, there's no more important date than August 15th, 1971. That's more than 50 years ago. On that day, President Richard Nixon abolished the convertibility of the US dollar into gold. Here's the front page from the New York Times the next day. You know the story, I'm sure, or maybe you think you do, because this move gave the people who control the regulation and the distribution of the US dollar, that's the Fed, the Treasury, and the big banks, the ability to create, borrow, and devalue our money as much as they want, and for their own benefit. Ever since that day, the value and the purchasing power of our dollars have been collapsing. It's no coincidence that as a result of Nixon's devaluation of the dollar, some of the savviest and most powerful people in America, the CEOs and executives at the biggest and most important U.S. companies, began looking for a better way to protect themselves and grow their wealth. Their solution? They created America's new money. Here's how it happened. For a whole generation, from the 1940s to the 1960s, CEO pay remained essentially constant. The average salary was about $1 million per year, paid in cash. In the 1950s, for example, 93% of total CEO compensation in America consisted of regular old US dollars in the form of salaries and bonuses. But then, beginning in the 1970s and accelerating into the 1980s, something really important changed. Once the US went off the gold standard, once the purchasing power of the dollar began falling dramatically, CEO pay began to rise. CEO pay rose 20% in the 1970s, CEO pay went up 50% in the 1980s, and then soared by a whopping 125% in the 1990s, and then doubling again by 2005. In total, CEO pay went from 25 times the average worker's salary back in the early 1970s to about 500 times the average worker's salary during the period. How did that happen? Well, CEOs and other executives continued to collect sizable salaries and bonuses. But they also made one big, important change. They insisted on getting paid in the form of America's new money, too, ultimately getting more than half of their total compensation in new money instead of regular old US dollars. And while the purchasing power of traditional US dollars continued plummeting year after year, the value of America's new money, as tracked by a simple index, rose 1,500% during the same period. Look at this chart that compares the value of the old money to the new money over this period. As you have probably figured out by now, what changed for America's CEOs and executives is that beginning in the 1970s, when the value of the US dollar began its long-term decline, they began to demand more and more of their pay in America's new money in the form of equity and options grants. Today, CEOs get 57% of their compensation in stock and option equity grants. I will personally ultimately get 90% plus of my compensation in equity too. In short, equity-backed assets have become America's new money. This ability to get equity instead of regular old dollars has changed my life on 2 occasions. I told you about how I've structured my pay so that I don't collect a salary, but this secret is also what enabled my mom and dad to enjoy a comfortable retirement. You see, my dad was a business journalist who landed a great job in public relations at the Coca-Cola Company. He worked there from 1979 until his early retirement in 1996 at age 55. My dad's salary was nothing to brag about. He was a middle manager and my mom was a school teacher. We didn't have a lot of cash, but my dad understood what was happening to our currency. So he participated fully in Coca-Cola's employee investment program, buying shares with about 15% of his salary every single year. Coca-Cola's stock appreciated about 30% a year over his time at the company. And it was those investments that assured my family a far better than middle-class life, enabling my parents to retire very comfortably. What about Coke employees who didn't make those investments? They're trying to survive on Social Security, and they're probably failing. This same kind of bifurcation, investors who have wealth versus employees who struggle to make a living, is playing out across our entire society. The middle class is disappearing. There are only 2 classes in America anymore, owners and serfs. If you think I'm exaggerating, just look at what happened last summer when America's auto workers went on strike. As you probably remember, U.S. auto company workers and the United Auto Workers Union wanted higher pay to keep up with soaring living costs. And you can't blame them. They've been screwed for decades. Factory workers in America should be among the wealthiest people in the world because of the value of what they produce. Throughout American history, wages were linked to those increases in productivity. Most people don't know this, but Henry Ford actually doubled his factory workers' salaries overnight in 1913 because their innovations had doubled productivity. But that all stopped in 1971 when we started printing unlimited amounts of money. So today, no matter how many times they go out on strike, GM, Ford, and other union workers are doomed. It doesn't matter that they got a 33% wage increase just a few months ago. Those wage increases don't even match the 50% decline in the purchasing power of the dollar over the past decade. These poor union workers will never, ever keep up. They'll continue to get poorer, and as a result, they will never work hard enough to compete. These moves will ultimately push Ford, GM, and Chrysler into bankruptcy yet again. Meanwhile, look at the most important U.S. competitor, Tesla. It's a completely different story at that company. Why? Well, because Tesla pays employees with shares of stock. This enables Tesla to pay line workers about half as much in hourly cash as the union workers, but overall, pay for Tesla employees is much, much higher because of their stock options and equity grants. In fact, many Tesla line workers have become millionaires because of their stock grants. And you can bet they're working a lot harder as a result of this kind of incentive pay. This chart tells the whole story. It shows the purchasing power of the US dollar down 30% versus the price of Tesla's shares up more than 1,000% in recent years. Okay, I know what you're probably thinking. This is all great for you, Porter, and for your dad, and it's great for the other CEOs and the rich people who work for Elon Musk. But how does this help me? I'm not going to get a big equity or stock option grant anytime soon. Well, that's exactly why I put together this presentation today. Remember, there's a new form of money in America, and it's making some people wildly rich. It's no longer just equity and shares of publicly traded businesses. There are now enormous opportunities in all kinds of equity assets that were previously beyond the reach of all but the wealthiest families and institutions. Here's what I mean. There is no doubt that equity ownership is one of the greatest financial inventions in history. Because for most of human existence, only one family or one small group could own any large asset. But beginning in the 1600s, most famously in Amsterdam, home of the world's first stock exchange, people began creating joint stock companies to help fund the pursuit of very costly projects, like sailing across the globe to find spices or precious metals. Equity ownership was a revolutionary change that allowed businesses to raise money and allowed individuals to own assets that were previously out of reach. This revolution led to capitalism, to the stock market as we know it today, and has helped lift billions of people out of poverty. It's why you can own valuable businesses like Disney, Apple, and Walmart. And now a new era has begun, where even more radical changes are underway. You see, for most of the past 100 years, regular folks were stuck investing only in ordinary, publicly traded stocks. Most people could not invest in compelling early-stage businesses or high-end collectibles like art or classic cars or music or film rights or sports teams and TV shows, all assets that have helped make many people very rich. These very lucrative assets, and many more, were previously available only to the ultra-wealthy and investment banks. But now that's all changing. As the value of the dollar and other global currencies are destroyed, and as new technologies such as internet payments and the blockchain for tracking and registration emerge, the very definition of money, banking, and equity is changing blindingly fast. In fact, today there are dozens of platforms where you can acquire an equity stake in assets that were completely off limits in the past. For example, most people don't know this, but a business called Masterworks is now the largest art buyer in the world. What Masterworks does is buy valuable blue chip art by artists like Picasso and Monet. And then they divide it up into shares. They register those with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, and they allow you to buy equity in these paintings, just like you would buy in an ordinary stock. While the U.S. dollar is worth about 25% less than it was a decade ago, Masterworks details how the value of a Picasso work went up more than 4,000% in a recent 9-year period. Other paintings have returned as much as 789% in as little as 30 days. Then there's a platform called Rally Road, which allows you to buy equity in some of the world's most famous collectibles, like a 1952 Mickey Mantle rookie baseball card, a 1685 Shakespeare Fourth Folio book, and even an original copy of the U.S. Declaration of Independence. The current price is around $30 per share. Again, while the dollar has fallen 10% in value and its purchasing power has dropped by 20% in just the past 2 years, shares in Mickey Mantle's rookie card are up 165% during the same time. Platforms like CrowdStreet allow you to buy shares of major housing and commercial real estate projects without having to do any of the work yourself. We've helped hundreds of people take advantage of these deals already. And while the value of the US dollar continues to fall, people taking advantage of these deals are getting amazing returns. One customer, for example, told me how he recently made so much money from these deals, he bought a second home. But mark my words, this is a huge and important trend, and it's just getting started. Soon, you will be able to take an equity stake in just about everything you can imagine. Not only collectibles like artwork and real estate, but assets like wine, sports teams, and even people. Yes, equity and people. In fact, it's already happening. Have you heard of Fernando Tatis? He's a baseball star with the San Diego Padres. 2 years ago, he signed a massive new contract worth a whopping $340 million over 14 years. At the time, it was the third highest total payout in Major League Baseball history. But that's not what made this deal so remarkable. What made this deal unique was that 4 years earlier, at age 18, Tatis sold equity in himself to a group of investors. While the exact details are not public, it's estimated Tatis received a few $1,000,000 when he was 18 in return for roughly 8% of his future earnings. This ultimately resulted in a huge payday for both Tatis and his investors, who likely netted nearly 15 times their initial investment when Tatis signed his big new deal. It was a great deal for Tatis too, because he banked guaranteed millions as a teenager. money he got to keep no matter what happened with his baseball career, and even if he had never made it to the majors or suffered a career-ending injury. Of course, it was a huge payday for the investors who made many times their money. An NBA point guard named Spencer Dinwiddie did something similarly recently when he essentially sold shares of his recent contract. And here's the fascinating part. Selling equity in yourself is not just for pro athletes. Today, young people all over America are inking similar deals in part to help defray soaring college costs. Trina Spear, a Harvard Business School graduate who raised capital in herself on a platform called Upstart, explained, "You're worth this much given your future projections about what you're going to make in life. It's just math." An investor in these types of future earnings deals says, "The failure rate for a company is much higher than for a talented individual." Remember, money is never quiet. It's always shifting, especially when the value of the existing money is being destroyed. What I want you to realize is that this is how our money is shifting right now. This is how equity in thousands of various assets is becoming America's new currency. And like I said, this is just the start. It's a huge trend you're going to see much, much more of in the years to come. While the government and large banking institutions continue to destroy the value and the purchasing power of the US dollar, savvy Americans will save and grow rich with different versions of our new money. Ray Dalio, who's the founder of the world's largest hedge fund, Bridgewater Associates, explains it all this way. "We are in a world where money as we know it is in jeopardy. We are printing too much. And it's not just the United States. People are going to say, 'Where is my safe store of wealth?' I think the question over the next number of years is really, what is money? Not just a medium of exchange, but a storehold of wealth." And this is why today, millions of Americans, including myself and some of my employees, are turning away from ordinary collapsing dollars to various forms of equity to grow and protect our wealth. This is the biggest and most important trend in the financial world today, and it's all just getting started. As former NASDAQ CEO Bob Greifeld says, "This is the biggest opportunity set we can think of over the next decade or so." Blythe Masters, a former JP Morgan executive, adds that it is going to change the way that our financial world operates. Already, you can buy equity in thousands of assets that were previously off limits to regular folks. And soon, you'll be able to buy and sell equity in every conceivable asset. Your home, your jewelry, your art, your life insurance policy, even in your career. Imagine, for example, that you bought your house years ago and now it's worth considerably more than you paid. How can you currently take advantage of this gain? Well, you could sell and move, but then you've got to pay a fortune for another home. You could take out a home equity loan or spend a fortune doing a reverse mortgage. But those options are expensive and restrictive, and really only enrich bankers. But imagine this scenario instead. Imagine if you could sell a small piece of the equity of your current home to investors with clear terms on when you liquidate and at what price. You'd get immediate cash, you'd get to stay in your home, and you could structure the deal however you'd like. Investors would profit only when you sold according to the terms of the contract. The amazing thing is, in some places in America, you can already do this in various forms. You can sell a small equity percentage to enjoy the profits now and stay in your home. Again, this shift in our money is booming, and the trend is still in its infancy. Today, I want to show you how to take advantage of this mega trend and how to set yourself up for the biggest possible gains to come. In fact, I want to introduce you to one of the world's leading experts on this subject. He's a Wall Street legend, a former hedge fund manager, and my business partner. He's a man I know can help you make a lot of money on this inevitable trend. Whitney Tilson and I have known each other for decades, and I was finally able to hire him to be part of my firm 5 years ago. When we first discussed the idea of showing Americans the urgency and importance of being on the right side of this new money trend, I insisted on being part of the effort because it's changed my life on 2 occasions. Today, Whitney is the lead analyst at the publication I started 25 years ago called Stansberry's Investment Advisory. Whitney and the rest of the team there have found 3 huge opportunities that can radically improve your finances in the years to come. I asked Whitney to tell you about the specifics because he has studied these opportunities in much more detail than I have. Whitney, nice to see you. What do you want to start with here?
Thanks, Porter. Like you said, there are several huge opportunities here. First, I'd like to detail the research we've done on how to capitalize on this huge shift in growth in the availability of equity in everything. What we found is that there's a secret approach that's as much as 10 times more lucrative than buying regular stocks over the long run. The second thing I want to show folks is a perfectly legal way to get some of the most valuable equity on the planet for free. Yes, there's a catch, but it's well worth it. I've used this secret personally and in my funds for 20 plus years. I've been on the phone and at many meetings with the world's leading expert. He's one of the richest people in America today. And also, I want to show folks how to take an early stake in the most advanced, most sophisticated, and most secure version of America's new money. It's still very early in this emerging trend, but we found a remarkable way to get in on the ground floor. Okay, let's get to it. One thing most people don't realize is that there's a small group of companies that control the majority of the world's equity exchanges. You've certainly heard of the New York Stock Exchange, NYSE for example, but you might not know that instead of buying stocks on the NYSE, you can actually buy the NYSE Stock Exchange itself. It went public in 2005. Since then, it has returned 2,600%. That's 10 times more than the NYSE Composite Index, which is made up of stocks that trade on the exchange. In other words, you're much better off owning the actual exchange rather than the stocks that trade on the exchange. This is a huge secret of the financial world that my team and I discovered, and it's one of the easiest and most straightforward ways to take advantage of America's new money shift. What's interesting is that we found the best equity exchanges are near monopolies that benefit from significant barriers to entry. And the truly amazing thing is, it doesn't matter if the markets are going up or down. These exchanges get paid no matter what. In fact, they make even more money in volatile markets because there's more trading. For example, Porter, you probably remember when Silicon Valley Bank collapsed last March. Well, get this. One of the exchanges our team recommends you buy had its highest volume ever that month. We believe you must own the best equity exchanges right now and for the future. Because the government has destroyed our currency and continues to monkey around with interest rates, markets will for sure continue to be very volatile for many years to come. And who benefits from this the most? The equity exchanges. Over the long term, these businesses have nearly tripled the returns of the overall stock market during the same period. And the best of these businesses have done 10 times better than the overall markets. Everywhere you look around the world, owning the equity market is way better than owning the overall stocks in the stock market. Look at the incredible long-term returns. Japan, Germany. Today, I want to show you the two best investments in this space, which could be set to soar hundreds of percent over the long term as equity continues its transition to becoming our new currency. These are phenomenal businesses, which could expand to all kinds of other assets over time. Also, keep in mind, only about 53% of Americans own regular stocks today, up from 32% in 1989. And as the dollar continues to fall, this percentage will surely go higher. One thing to note, one of the magnificent 7 stocks that have driven U.S. markets higher just made a $1 billion investment in one of the exchanges we recommend you buy today. They've structured a 10-year partnership. The point is, this is where you want your money right now. We conservatively estimate hundreds of percent returns in the coming years for the 2 exchanges we recommend you buy right away. Everything you need to know is in our latest report called How to Make 500% in the Coming Years with America's New Money. Okay, that's one move I recommend folks make right away. Here's the second. It's a way to essentially get free equity in the public markets. Years ago, I discovered another one of the biggest secrets in the financial world. It's a business that has found a way to essentially get free ownership in many of the world's best stocks. How does it work? Well, think about it this way. Just about every financial service business, including banks, brokers, hedge fund managers, venture capitalists, etc., has to pay for the capital they use, right? Banks borrow from depositors and investors. Brokers and hedge funds have investors, all of whom must be repaid. But what if there was a way for a business to get access to seemingly unlimited capital for free, and you could use that money to buy shares in America's best companies? That's what I want to show you how to take an ownership stake in today. It's probably the biggest investment loophole in the financial world, and it's all 100% legal and licensed by state governments. Most importantly, the returns have been astounding. We wrote about this secret back in 2012, for example, and the 3 recommendations our team made have returned as much as 419%, 253%, and 473% to date. And today we'll show you how to do the exact same thing to potentially make 400% plus gains in the years to come. We'll show you how to use this secret to get ownership in companies like Apple, Alphabet, Home Depot, John Deere, and more. Again, to me, this is one of the safest and most conservative ways to acquire equity, and it's proved to be very, very lucrative. Everything you need to know is in our report called The 400% Free Equity Secret. Okay, so I've talked about how you can take advantage of the booming equity in everything trend now underway by owning the best equity exchanges. We talked about what I believe is one of the biggest secrets in the financial world, a way to get essentially free equity stakes in the world's best businesses. But there's so much more we want you to take advantage of too. For example, here's something my team recently put the finishing touches on: how the U.S. Congress will hand us our next 5x trade. The collapsing value of our money inevitably leads to much higher energy prices. And recently, we found an incredible way to make money in the energy space with a unique type of company that has almost no expenses and soars hundreds of % when energy prices move up.
Thanks, Whitney. This is a big deal. I remember when we made more than 400% with a very similar trade a few years back, so I'm excited you're putting this trade on again right now. All right, so how can you get a copy of all of this research and everything else that Whitney has mentioned here in your hands right away? It's simple. Let me explain how our business works and why we do things so differently than most of our competitors. "25 years ago, a small group of partners and I pioneered a new model of financial research, independent from advertisers, Wall Street, and the mainstream financial media. We refuse to this day to take commissions. We refuse to accept advertising, and we have never borrowed a penny. Everything we built came from the $36,000 investment I used to get started. Since 1999, we've just hired the best analysts like Whitney Tilson, and we have simply told the truth, building our business around one key goal: to give our subscribers the information we'd most want if our roles were reversed. To do so requires a dedication to publishing the facts that we uncover without fear or favoritism. This is a role and an obligation that the mainstream media has completely forgotten. And that's why, once again, our team at Stansberry's Investment Advisory has produced a series of research reports that explain what no one else will tell you and show you exactly how to prepare and prosper over the coming years. I invite you today to try a no-risk subscription for Stansberry's Investment Advisory, the flagship research publication I first started 25 years ago. Whitney Tilson is now the lead analyst on this team, and helping him is Alan Gula, who's a CFA and who worked at Goldman and Barclays. Alan's one of the best investors I've ever met. And Mike DeBiase, who's a former CPA and a top accountant. As soon as you let us know you'd like to give this research a look, you'll get immediate access to all of the reports that we've mentioned so far, including how to make 500% in the coming years with America's new money, the 400% free equity secret, how the U.S. Congress will hand us our next 5 times trade. And that's just the beginning. My guess is you've probably subscribed to some kind of investment research before. We've inspired a lot of imitators over the last 25 years, but to my knowledge, There's no other research service available with a track record that comes anywhere close to what the Stansberry's investment advisory team has produced over more than 2 decades. The proof is in the pudding, and the numbers are staggering. The current average return among all the more than 24 open positions in Stansberry's investment advisory as of late January is an incredible 130%. I challenge you to find a single research group on or off Wall Street who has helped folks not only avoid so many big losses, but also find so many extremely profitable investments. This research could make an enormous difference in your life. As one longtime subscriber, Frank K., told us recently, because of your guidance, my wife and I have reached millionaire status. Another long-term subscriber reached out to say, we have been able to grow our investment accounts from $200,000 to over $1 million in 2 years. But remember, the investment results described in these testimonials are not typical. They're from long-term customers. No matter how good the research, all investing in securities does carry some degree of risk. You could lose all or some of any investment. And to be honest, what I'm most proud of is not the incredible gains our research helped so many people achieve, but how our work has helped folks gain a deeper understanding of what's really going on in the financial world, to spot not only big opportunities, but also hidden dangers that no one else is talking about. For example, going all the way back to my very first issue that I published in August 1999, I accurately predicted the collapse of what at the time were dominant companies, including Kodak, Sears, JCPenney, Bethlehem Steel. At the same time, we were recommending future juggernauts like Amazon and Walmart. People thought I'd lost my mind back in 2002, for example, when I predicted the demise of AT&T. More than 20 years later, the stock is still down 60% from that high. That same year, I was probably the first to issue similar warnings about General Electric. I said it was a house of cards doomed to collapse in an Enron-like implosion of bad debt. People thought I was crazy at the time because GE was the most valuable publicly traded company in the world, and its CEO, Jack Welch, was an American hero. But I was right. I did the same with General Motors in 2006. Despite many analysts mocking my predictions as absurd, the company filed for bankruptcy just like I predicted it would 3 years later. Then there was my big call in 2008. Few believed me when I explained how America's 2 big government-backed mortgage providers, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, would go bankrupt. At the time, public officials told Congress that these firms were, quote, adequately capitalized, but that was a lie. Then there was 2018 when people mocked my prediction of a debt jubilee. I wrote an entire book about how millions of Americans would call for the government to wipe out their debt to address America's biggest grievances: racism, income disparity, poverty, and inequality. And sure enough, Joe Biden promised to wipe out student debt for millions, another billion-dollar debt jubilee to essentially buy votes for the upcoming election. I hired Whitney Tilson to lead Stansberry's investment advisory because he's got a similar record of making bold, controversial, and spot-on calls over the years. He actually went on 60 Minutes back in 2008 to call the bottom of the stock market when everyone else was terrified amidst the financial crisis. He returned to 60 Minutes in 2015 to warn the entire country about a flooring company that was selling toxic products right before its stock collapsed by 80%. Whitney also called the exact top to the hour in marijuana stocks a few years ago. He even predicted the dot-com crash and the Lehman Brothers bankruptcy too. Of course, the question Whitney and I always get is, why didn't others, particularly the mainstream financial press and Wall Street analysts, see the big problems that were so obvious to you guys? I can't say for sure, but I think it's because what you believe about the world often depends on where you sit. What I mean by that is, it's difficult to be objective about the hand that's feeding you. General Electric was a major issuer of corporate debt and paid millions in fees every year to Wall Street's biggest banks. It also owned a major financial cable channel, CNBC. Which financial institution could afford to go on the record saying the company was another Enron in the making? Nobody. General Motors and its local dealers were some of the largest buyers of advertising in the United States. Virtually every newspaper and media network wanted GM to buy ad space. So of course, They're not going to report critically about GE's management or its declining financial results. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac sit squarely in the center of the entire global financial system. Who could have warned about their impending collapse without risking a global financial panic? As the chairman of the European Central Bank said during the financial crisis, when a problem is really serious, quote, you lie. But Whitney and I and our team of analysts don't lie, not only because that's who we are, but also because we're not conflicted. You see, virtually every media outlet has some kind of obvious bias that greatly distorts what they report. But individuals and families with money in the markets need objective facts and independent opinions to be successful and to protect themselves. So, just like we were among the very first to warn people about the collapses of these major companies like AT&T, GE, and GM, and just like I was among the first to explain how the government-backed mortgage firms would go bust, Whitney was among the first to tell people to get back into stocks in March of 2020. And he was among the first to pound the table on Netflix when it bottomed at $8 in 2012, after flying to California to have lunch with the CEO. Today, I bet we'll be the first to explain how the US dollar is set for an enormous fall in the years to come, and among the first to show you how and why America's new money can potentially make you rich, even while so many others are falling further and further behind. Well, how much does Stansberry's investment advisory cost? I believe Whitney's team's monthly reports, full access to literally hundreds of special reports that we have produced over decades, plus access to Stansberry's investment advisory's full portfolio of the best investments in the world right now, is one of the best bargains in the entire financial world. Of course, you must keep in mind that no matter how good our research has been over the past 25 years, all investments carry risk. Please never invest more than you are willing to lose. But as a point of reference, since inception, the average annualized gain of Stansberry Investment Advisory is 15.1%. That means our recommendations would give you 100% more money than sticking your money in the S&P 500 index over the past 25 years. I don't know about you, but I think that most Americans could use 100% more money over the long term. Before I show you the specifics on how to get started, however, there's one more thing I'd like Whitney to tell you about, which we'll send you immediately as part of this deal today. Whitney, tell the folks what you and the team have been investigating, how so many of America's biggest companies are making a radical switch in the way currency and equity is distributed, and how it has the potential to change everything about our monetary system.
Sure, Porter. Look, everything we've talked about so far, how to potentially make a lot of money from the best equity exchanges in the world, how to essentially get free equity in the world's best businesses, and how to cash in on the inevitability of a falling US dollar. These are critical steps you should take right now to protect and grow your money in the years to come. But there's more to this story too. You see, these steps I've described so far allow you to do very well in our current system. But the world of money is changing, and fast. Porter, you and I have talked about this a lot. Eventually, I'm convinced we'll see a new and very different way of exchanging currencies and equities in America. And yes, it will likely involve blockchain technology. This technology, as most people know, is essentially computer programming that allows people to reliably exchange products, goods, and money without a trusted third party, like a bank or web platform such as Amazon. But what most people don't realize is that America's currency and equity system of the future has already gotten started. It's already quietly operating under the radar right now. And no, it's not just a bunch of computer programmers or crypto geeks. This new system is actually being tested and used in the real world by some of the biggest, richest, and most successful businesses in America. I'm talking about companies like Amazon, Disney, Fidelity, Samsung, just to name a few. Look, it's still very early. You will do very well by simply taking advantage of all the ideas and opportunities I described so far. But I also encourage you to learn about the big change coming to our money system and to the new ways of owning equity. Then, if you'd like, take a small stake in the most important player in this field, which is doing business with every single one of the businesses I mentioned above. In short, today I want to show you the smartest, simplest, and potentially most profitable way to take advantage of America's new system for owning and exchanging money and equity. But again, this is still in the very early stages. It's all still very speculative. But it's caught the attention of many of the most successful and powerful people in America, like billionaire Mark Cuban, who has taken a major stake and says, "I am very bullish." At the very least, I want you to learn more about this platform because it gives you a glimpse of the future into what money and owning equity in America and elsewhere will soon look like. One of the top analysts at our firm has put together the best overview I've seen. It's called The Future of Money and Equity in America.
Thanks, Whitney. And yes, I agree. 5 years from now, most Americans are going to be completely shocked at how our money and ownership of assets has changed. Like Whitney says, this is your peek into the future, plus a way to potentially also make many times your money. So how do you get access to Stansberry's investment advisory and everything we've mentioned here? Well, a 1-year trial subscription to Stansberry's investment advisory comes with all the reports we've mentioned here. How to make 500% in the coming years with America's new money. The 400% free equity secret. How the U.S. Congress will hand us our next 5 times trade. The future of money and equity in America. Plus full access to Whitney's entire model portfolio, where the average return as of this writing is 130%. Plus the monthly Stansberry's Investment Advisory Actions to Take reports, which are delivered by Whitney Tilson and Alan Gula on the first Friday of each month. Plus access to our full archive of special reports on topics such as the best business on earth, the tax-free way to make 500% in America, and the Money Manifesto, my 54-page summary of the most important ideas and concepts regarding money, investing, and building wealth. Plus, daily email updates called the Digest. Last but not least, I'm also going to send you the research that I am personally writing for my own private research firm, which is called Porter & Company. Every other Friday at 4 p.m., I'll send you an email with details on what my team and I are most excited about. Access to all of this as part of a Stansberry's Investment Advisory subscription retails for $199 per year, which is an absolute steal. But today, I'm offering you a much better deal. 75% off this retail rate. That's right. You'll pay only $49 for the next year as a special incentive to give our work a try. Look, I don't know if our work is right for you. If you are easily offended or especially sensitive, our work might not be a good fit. But whether you share my libertarian views or not, I bet you'll agree with me that we're living in a very dangerous moment, especially for anyone who's accumulated a decent amount of savings and wealth. Our government has completely destroyed our money and rigged the entire system in favor of big banks and financial institutions. As currency historian Jack Weatherford says, the great struggle of history has been for the control over money. To control the production and distribution of money is to control the wealth, resources, and people of the world. We are at the beginning of a great new money struggle, and if you do nothing, you are going to pay a huge price in the years to come. Remember, desperate governments do desperate things, but if you understand what's happening and position yourself properly as Whitney has described, you can actually turn the government's actions in your favor. There's no doubt in my mind that America's new money will continue to enrich a subset of the population, including me and many other like-minded individuals. On the other hand, I'm also 100% convinced that millions of Americans are going to be hurt over the next few years because they don't understand what's going on or the critical steps they have to take. You'll have to decide which side you want to be on. Join us today, and I promise we'll do everything we can to make sure that you are on the right side of these terrifying trends. The best part is, if after seeing all of this work, if you decide for any reason that our ideas and recommendations are just not right for you, it's okay. We can part as friends. So, if upon closer inspection you feel that Stansberry's Investment Advisory is not right for you, Simply let my Maryland-based customer service team know inside the first 30 days, and you'll get a full cash refund of every penny that you've paid. Get started today by clicking the button below. This will take you to a secure order form where you can review everything one more time before submitting your order, which will immediately give you access to everything I've described here. Again, just click the Get Started button below. And thanks for taking the time to watch this presentation. I hope you take advantage of the enormous opportunity before you today.